A thin blade of light cuts across the room as he smiles like nothing is breaking. The moment holds itself in a strange, breathless suspension, as if the air is waiting for one of us to admit what neither of us wants to name. The trembling key on the counter catches that thin slice of light vibrating slightly each time the refrigerator hums, though neither of us moves toward it. I stand near the window, the late evening glow sharp enough to create a second version of me on the glass, a reflection that looks steadier than I feel. Jason leans against the doorway between the kitchen and living room posture, casual voice muted in its stillness, but something inside the silence feels off balance, as though one wrong word would tilt the entire scene. I keep watching him because the stillness in his smile doesn't match the tension in his fingers, and even now I can see him pressing his thumb into his palm over and over, a habit he hides when he thinks I'm not looking. He inhales, and that thin blade of light shifts across his shoulder, dividing his frame almost perfectly in half, giving me the illusion that one side tells the truth, and the other clings to a lie he hasn't found the courage to release. I don't say anything. I let the quiet stretch until it becomes its own presence, something sitting between us like a cold witness. The key trembles again, and the sound is small, just a tiny metallic click, but it rings inside me with the weight of something unfinished. He tries to speak, stops, then lifts his chin slightly, as if bracing for a confession he never actually gives. I know this posture. I know every version of this silence. It was the same quiet he carried on the night he knelt with a ring box that looked slightly too polished, offering a future that would unravel in my hands weeks later. Even now, standing in this dim room, the memory presses into my ribs, as if it can push its shape back into my present, reminding me of the moment everything shifted beneath the surface of his perfect gesture. He says my name softly, almost tenderly, almost convincingly, but the softness feels practiced. The silence that follows lands heavier than the word itself. His smile wavers, not enough for a stranger to notice, but enough for me to feel the weight of it. I realize his smile is holding back a truth that's already leaking into the room. My breath stays measured, controlled, because if I allow emotion to move too quickly, I'll lose the quiet understanding I've earned these past weeks, the understanding that something shattered long before either of us admitted it. He steps forward, once the floor creaking under his heel, and the blade of light slices across his chest. For a moment he looks cut into pieces, stitched together only by whatever apology he thinks will keep me from leaving. The trembling key flicks another glint upward, reflecting against the wall like a signal flare I didn't ask for. He follows my gaze toward it, and something in his eyes folds inward. A realization, a fear, a memory, maybe all three. I shift my weight not to step closer, not to step away, just to anchor myself in a moment that wants to sweep me back into the past, into every unanswered question. From that night, he made me believe in something he never intended to finish. He whispers, "Can we talk?" But the words land flat, their warmth mismatched with the cold slicing through the room. I can feel the distance more sharply than the light, more clearly than the key trembling between us. And I don't answer because we both know this talk won't undo anything. The silence becomes the answer. His jaw tightens, the room draws itself inward, and the key trembles one last time, as if it too understands what happens next. Something inside him cracks beneath the weight of a truth he can't keep standing upright. The light thins, sharpens, and the room settles into a tension that feels less like a beginning and more like an ending waiting to be spoken. The air holds the moment in a fragile, deliberate pause. The fractured light refuses to soften as the silence edges toward breaking. The sharp line of brightness cuts deeper, refusing to blur as everything tilts toward collapse. I'm Elena Ward, 33, a project manager from Seattle, Washington. The morning after everything started to unravel, I stood in our living room, watching the glass reflection on the balcony door bend, as though the light itself resisted staying straight around us. At first I brushed it off as the kind of optical trick that happens when the sun hits the pane at the wrong angle, but something about the warped reflection pulled at me in a way I couldn't name. Shadows split faintly across the floor. I remember whispering that line to myself without understanding why it felt like a warning more than an observation. Jason came into the room with that same curated warmth he carried everywhere, offering a soft morning babe, as if the world were still intact. He always had this habit of lingering in doorways, leaning just slightly into the frame, like he wanted to appear casual, but also centered the fixed point around which everything else turned. I smiled back, though the smile felt borrowed from a version of myself. I used to be someone who believed the proposal he staged had been genuine, someone who hadn't yet learned how easily truth can split under gentle pressure. He walked toward the kitchen pouring coffee with the steady rhythm of someone who expected applause for being consistent. But even from across the room, I noticed the slight shift in his energy, the way he avoided looking directly at the reflection on the glass, the way his fingers curled around the mug a bit too tightly. I told myself not to think too much of it, that people have off days and strange mornings. I'd spent years training my mind to rationalize subtle discomfort, smoothing wrinkles in reality so they didn't disturb the picture I wanted to keep. He asked if I slept well, and I lied, automatically telling him yes. The truth was that I had lain awake for hours replaying the proposal in my head, the way his voice trembled too quickly, the way he kept checking the angles of the crowd, the way the ring box felt oddly light in my hand. 1,000 tiny details I dismissed because I wanted the moment to be real. As he talked about weekend plans, his words sounded distant, like they were passing through water. I leaned closer to the balcony door, tracing the distorted reflection with my fingertip. The bending image looked like a second version of me, pulled slightly out of shape, suspended between clarity and doubt. I felt the first quiet tremor of a truth I wasn't ready to touch. Jason came up behind me, resting a hand on my shoulder, and the gesture was warm enough to confuse me again. "You okay?" he asked, tone gentle. Too gentle, the kind of softness people use when they want to steer you away from something. I nodded, but the motion felt detached. He didn't press further, which struck me as unusual. Jason liked to know things, liked to have information before anyone else did. His silence was more telling than any question he might have asked. The morning moved in slow fragments. He showered, got dressed, left for work with a kiss on my forehead that felt like an echo of sincerity rather than sincerity itself. Once the door closed, the apartment exhaled. I stood in the center of the room, staring again at the warped glass reflection. The seed of doubt that had lived quietly in me since the proposal pushed a little deeper, stretching into a shape I couldn't ignore. I replayed everything I had overlooked: the ring box that didn't have the right kind of weight, the photographer who seemed too prepared, the way the crowd positioned itself without Jason giving any visible signal, the faint impression that he wasn't asking me a question so much as performing one. I went to the kitchen, rinsing a cup that didn't need rinsing, my mind folding over itself in loops I couldn't untangle. The reflection in the window kept pulling me back, bending with the shifting sunlight, distorting my outline, until I barely recognized myself. That was the moment I knew something in our story had tilted, even if I didn't yet understand the angle. I checked my phone, scrolling past messages from friends congratulating us, asking for details about the wedding details I hadn't even begun to imagine because Jason never talked about next steps. I typed responses that felt hollow, thanking them, sending heart emojis, performing the version of myself they expected. When I set the phone down, the room felt different, quiet in a way that didn't comfort. I walked back to the balcony door, resting my fingertips against the cool glass. The reflection steadied for a moment, straightened, then bent again as a cloud shifted outside. And with it, my certainty bent too. Something was wrong. Something had been wrong for longer than I wanted to admit. I inhaled slowly, letting the suspicion settle just enough to anchor itself inside me. Whatever truth waited beneath the surface, it was already moving, already preparing to rise. The reflection trembled again, hinting that the floor beneath this story was ready to shift. Mark showed up beside my desk just after lunch, shifting his weight like someone trying to decide whether the truth he carried was his to reveal. The faint smell of cigarette ash lingered on his sleeve, a sharp contrast to the sterile office air, and it caught my attention before he even spoke. "Elena," he murmured, lowering his voice. "I think you should see this." He held out his phone screen, dimmed but waiting. I hesitated for a second, a quiet instinct telling me that whatever sat on that device would split something open in me, something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. When I finally took the phone, the first thing I noticed was the familiar timestamp format, clean digital numbers lined in a narrow row. Ref PX 14, evidence number 1. My pulse fluttered as I read the exact time log during the proposal night information that should have matched Jason's story, but didn't. The screenshot showed him connected to the venue's Wi-Fi well before he told me he arrived. Not 5 minutes early, not 10, almost half an hour. 30 minutes unaccounted for, slipping through the cracks of a moment he had rehearsed so carefully. I handed the phone back slowly, feeling the truth settle into me like cold water. "Where did you get this?" I asked. Mark shrugged gently. "I ran analytics for event platforms last year. They store logs longer than people realize. I wasn't snooping. I swear I just saw the file name when you mentioned the proposal last week," and he trailed off, unsure how much he should admit. I nodded to relieve him, even though inside something was unraveling thread by thread. Jason had spoken so confidently about rushing to meet me, about almost being late, about how he barely had time to catch his breath before kneeling. The timeline wasn't a detail that should shift under scrutiny. A timeline is either true or it is maintained to hold a lie in place. When I returned to my desk, my fingers hovered above the keyboard, unable to type. My mind replayed the moment he knelt, the strange tightness in his smile, the faint tremble in his hands. Not nerves, but anticipation. And anticipation only made sense if he had been waiting for the crowd to gather, waiting for the photographer to angle himself, waiting for me to arrive exactly when he expected. My throat tightened. I pulled out my phone and typed, "Hey, what time did you get to the venue that night?" I watched the 3 little dots appear, disappear, then appear again. His first reply came too fast. "Right before you." Then another message. Maybe a couple minutes earlier. Then a third. Why I stared at the shifting explanations, the small, inconsistent adjustments, the unsteady rhythm of someone trying to remember the version of the story they gave before. The truth was starting to squeeze through the cracks he couldn't patch fast enough. I excused myself from the office and walked outside, the air cold against my cheeks. The sidewalk felt uneven as I replayed every detail I had ignored. Jason never improvised well. He rehearsed, planned, curated every gesture. The proposal had felt oddly timed, like he was checking invisible markers in the air around us. The crowd seemed too ready. The photographer seemed too positioned. The whole event sat too neatly between spontaneity and staging. Now, for the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge it. The moment hadn't been about me. It had been about the image of us, an image that required precision, a precision his timeline was now contradicting. My phone buzzed again. "Everything okay?" Jason wrote. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I needed space to feel the shift happening inside me. The doubt that once hovered silently at the edges of my thoughts now moved with weight, like something stepping out of the shadows, no longer content to be ignored. I walked back into the office and found Mark waiting, uncertainty in his eyes. "I didn't mean to overstep," he said quietly. "I just thought you should have all the information." I appreciated his hesitation. Some truths aren't easy to give, even when they're necessary. "Thank you," I told him, and I meant it. Still, when I sat down again, a hollow ache pressed beneath my ribs. Seeing the evidence was one thing. Accepting what it meant was another. I opened my email, pretending to work, but my mind drifted back to that night. The cheers, the lights, the sudden swell of music, the perfect framing of the sunset. All of it landing too gracefully, like the scene had been blocked in advance. Maybe it had. Maybe the truth wasn't about a lie of intention, but a lie of timing, layers of performance stitched together to create an illusion I stepped into without question. I inhaled slowly, steadying myself. Evidence number 1 wasn't explosive. It didn't expose everything. But it was the first undeniable crack in the facade. A timestamp doesn't lie. A person adjusting their story 3 times in a row might. Something quiet in me folded, shifting from uncertainty into recognition. When I looked up again, the office lights flickered faintly against the window, catching a thin dust trail of cigarette ash still clinging to my sleeve from Mark's earlier visit. It felt symbolic, as if the residue of truth remained, even after the moment passed. I brushed it away, but a small smear stayed a reminder I couldn't erase. When I finally left work, the sky had softened into a muted gray, the kind that holds its breath before a storm. I walked home slowly, feeling the weight of what I knew settled deeper into me. I wasn't ready to confront Jason yet, but the quiet inside me had changed shape. Doubt had become direction, suspicion had become momentum, and truth, still small, still forming, was beginning to show its outline, and the first fracture once seen refused to close again. The rooftop celebration buzzed with warm laughter and clinking glasses, a kind of effortless joy I couldn't fully feel, not with the questions tightening inside me. The evening light stretched long across the concrete, catching on metal railings and bouncing into strange angles that threw a metallic shadow over the crowd, slicing faces and gestures into pieces. Jason thrived in settings like this, crowded bright, full of people who admired the version of him he crafted with such precision. He rested a hand on the small of my back, guiding me through clusters of acquaintances with the same polished charm he used on clients. But even as he smiled, his eyes kept flicking toward the doors, checking who entered, monitoring the room, as though managing the scene instead of enjoying it. Lila found me before I could settle into the noise. Her mouth tightened just slightly, an expression I'd learned meant she was wrestling with something she didn't want to say. "Come with me," she murmured, squeezing my wrist in a way that nudged urgency into my pulse. She led me to the far side of the rooftop, where two women stood near the railing, their dresses catching the last streaks of sunlight. They didn't notice us at first. One leaned closer to the other, voice low, but traveling farther than she intended in the wind. "I still can't get over how staged that proposal looked," she whispered. "He asked us to stand in specific spots for the photos." My stomach dropped. This was evidence number 2, the overheard witness statement. The words hit me harder than I expected, even after the timestamp contradiction from earlier. Staged. Positions. Photos. All the parts of that night I had smoothed into a beautiful memory suddenly turned sharp, rearranging themselves into a truth I had been avoiding. I felt Lila's eyes on me, steady, waiting. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want you to hear it like this, but I thought you should know." Before I could respond, Jason appeared beside us, his timing too precise to be coincidence. His smile flickered in place like a light trying not to fail. "Everything okay over here?" he asked, voice deceptively casual. But the tension in his jaw betrayed him. The women noticed him and quickly excused themselves, slipping back into the crowd with the nervous energy of people who had said too much. Jason's gaze followed them before turning back to me. "What did they say?" he asked, though the edge in his tone revealed he already knew. I didn't answer immediately because I was watching the metallic shadow stretch across his face again, creating a split that made it difficult to decide which half of him was honest. "They said the proposal looked staged," I replied finally. He laughed too loudly, too quickly. "People love to make drama out of nothing," he said, lifting his drink as if to punctuate the lie. "I didn't ask anyone to stand anywhere. They must have misunderstood." But his voice betrayed him. The warmth evaporated, replaced by a tightness he tried to mask behind forced charisma. I watched the lie ripple through him faster than he could contain it. Lila didn't step away. Instead, she angled herself slightly toward me, silent but present, as if guarding me from the performance unfolding in front of us. Jason noticed. His smile thinned. "Babe, can we talk alone?" he asked, voice smoothing into a practiced softness that used to comfort me, but now felt like misdirection. I didn't move. "We're talking now," I said, keeping my tone even steady. The wind lifted a strand of hair across my cheek, and in that fleeting movement I caught a glint of something in Jason's expression, a flicker of fear. Not fear of hurting me, fear of exposure. He leaned closer, lowering his voice, even though the rooftop noise swallowed most of it. "Don't let gossip get in your head," he urged. People say things when they're jealous. You know that." I studied him. His posture was confident, but his hands betrayed him. His fingers tapped his glass in a nervous pattern, a rhythm he didn't notice himself making. Behind him, the metallic shadow stretched longer, slicing across his shoulder like an underline to the things he wasn't saying. Something about the space between his version of events and the witnesses echoed louder than any denial he offered. Lila finally spoke. "Jason, I heard them too. It didn't sound like gossip." His eyes snapped toward her, defensive heat rising fast. "You don't know what you heard," he said sharply. "Maybe stay out of it." Lila stepped back slightly, but she didn't apologize. She didn't have to. I had already felt the shift inside myself, the moment when the truth stops being an intruder and becomes a companion, insistent and impossible to dismiss. The warmth of the evening felt different now, as heavy as it was bright. The air vibrated with tension, as though the rooftop itself understood it was witnessing a fracture. Jason saw the change in my expression, the stillness that replaced my earlier uncertainty. He softened again, reaching for my hand. "Elena, please don't overthink this. You know I love you." The proposal was real. Everything was real. But I had seen the hesitation in the timestamp. I had heard the clarity of the witnesses' voices. And now, standing here with the city stretching behind us, I felt something inside me shift into alignment. Not the truth, not yet, but the awareness that truth was coming. I gently pulled my hand back. His face crumpled for a second before he smoothed it over again, but that split moment revealed more than he intended: guilt, fear, and something dangerously close to desperation. The crowd kept celebrating behind us, unaware that the moment of unraveling had already begun. I didn't need to say anything else. The silence between us did the work for me. And in that silence, the rooftop wind carried a truth he could no longer outrun. When I got home that evening, the apartment felt strangely hollow, as if the air inside had grown tired of holding a version of our story that no longer fit. There was a muted stillness coating the walls, a tension that made every sound feel sharper than it should. I dropped my keys on the table and stood for a moment without moving, letting the quiet press up against me until it felt almost familiar. That was when I noticed at the half-open drawer in the entryway pulled out just enough to break the symmetry Jason obsessed over. He never left things out of place, never left physical evidence of disorder. Seeing it ajar sent a ripple of unease across my skin. I knelt down and drew the drawer open the rest of the way. Inside, beneath old receipts and stray envelopes, was a slim folder I didn't recognize. I lifted it out slowly, as though disturbing dust might change what it contained. The papers inside were crisp, as if they hadn't been touched more than once. My breath caught when I found the small printout clipped to the front, an activity log with 2 timestamps circled in red pen. The gap between them was only 60 seconds, but it wasn't the size of the gap that mattered. It was the impossibility of it. 7:42 and 7:43. The missing minute. Evidence number 3. My heart picked up speed. Jason had claimed he arrived at the venue later, claimed he rushed, claimed he barely had time to gather everyone. But this log showed activity recorded when he insisted he wasn't there yet, and the red pen he had circled it himself. This wasn't something someone else found. This was something he saw, something he marked, something he hid. Why hide a minute unless that minute mattered? My hands trembled slightly as I held the page closer. A single minute can contain an entire lie if the timing is wrong. And this one was wrong enough to make my pulse throb in my fingertips. The apartment door clicked open behind me, and I flinched, stuffing the paper back into the folder and sliding it quickly into the drawer, pushing it shut, just as Jason stepped inside. His expression brightened when he saw me, but the brightness didn't reach his eyes. "You're home early?" he said, shrugging off his jacket. I forced a steady breath. "Yeah. Long day. Wanted some quiet." He smiled, stepping closer, the soft rhythm of his footsteps masking the tighter rhythm of his breathing. Something in him felt coiled wound too tightly to be casual. "I was thinking we could go out tonight," he offered. "Celebrate a little. We haven't had much time to enjoy being engaged." The word engaged slipped from his mouth too smoothly, almost defensively, like he was trying to anchor us to a reality that had already begun to drift away. I nodded faintly, though indecision tugged at me. I wasn't ready to confront him, not with only fragments of truth, not with only a minute of missing time. But I wasn't ready to pretend either. "Maybe we stay in," I said instead. "Just something quiet." He paused, studying me. "Everything okay?" His tone had softened, but the question sounded too targeted, like he wasn't asking about my day. He was asking if I knew something. I swallowed. "I'm just tired." He didn't fully believe me. I saw it in the way his shoulders stiffened, in the subtle tightening of his jaw. But he didn't press, didn't demand clarity the way he used to. It was then I realized something important. Jason was scared. Not of me leaving, not yet, but of the truth catching up to him faster than his rehearsed stories could adapt. Fear reveals people in ways honesty never can. We moved through the motions of the evening as though the floor weren't shifting beneath us. He cooked dinner, chopping vegetables with mechanical precision. I watched him from the corner of my eye, noting every flicker of discomfort in his face whenever he sensed my silence linger too long. It wasn't the silence he feared. It was the possibility that the silence meant knowledge. After eating, he stepped away to take a call. I hovered near the entryway, my eyes drawn back to the drawer, to the folder inside, to the minute that refused to make sense. I didn't open it again, not yet. I didn't need to. The image of those circled numbers had burned itself into memory. 7:42, 7:43, a missing minute, a misplaced truth, a piece of the puzzle he had hoped I wouldn't notice. When he returned, he tried for small talk, tried to weave comfort into the room, but every gesture felt slightly brittle. He was performing steadiness, not living it. "You're really quiet tonight," he said finally. I met his gaze, holding it long enough for him to shift uncomfortably. "Just thinking," I said. He exhaled, relieved but uncertain. He didn't ask what I was thinking about, and that more than anything told me he already knew. Later, as we got ready for bed, I caught the faintest trace of apprehension in the way he watched me brush my hair, the way his fingers drummed lightly against the dresser. He wasn't nervous about me. He was nervous about the questions I wasn't asking, the ones he thought might be forming, the ones I already had the beginnings of answers to. A single minute shouldn't have the power to change a story, but lies make time heavy. As I turned off the bedside lamp, the room darkened into a quiet that felt too aware, too attentive. My heartbeat steadied into resolve. The first contradiction had become something undeniable, and once truth begins to surface, it doesn't stop at 1 minute. And the deeper I looked, the more the silence hinted that the next crack was already forming. When I walked into the hallway that night, the air felt unsettled, like the apartment itself had been waiting for a confrontation neither of us had the courage to start. The overhead flickering bulb buzzed with a restless rhythm, casting light in sharp, uneven pulses across the wall. Jason stood beneath it, his face slicing in and out of shadow, giving him the uneasy look of someone caught between two versions of himself. I stopped a few steps away, watching the way the light fractured across his features, shadow split twitching under the flickering bulb. The moment felt like a repetition of something I hadn't fully noticed before an echo of a truth preparing to surface. "You're quiet again," he said, tone carefully neutral. He tried for a soft smile, but the light exposed its brittleness. "I just want to understand what's going on." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I studied him, his posture rigid with rehearsed calm, his fingers tightening around the rim of the glass he held, his shoulders set forward as if bracing against questions he couldn't control. The bulb flickered again, and in that split-second flash, I caught it, the subtle, sharp eye flick to the light overhead, before he forced his gaze back to me. A tell. A reflex. Evidence number 4. His silence didn't feel hesitant. It felt calculated. "Why did you circle that timestamp?" I asked quietly. His breath caught not enough for someone else to see, but enough for me to feel. His eyes darted upward again, involuntary, betraying him before he could shape the lie. What timestamp, he asked, voice too controlled. I kept my tone even. The one between 7:42 and 7:43. A small muscle in his jaw twitched. Another tell. He swallowed, shifting weight, searching for footing. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. The bulb cracked a flicker across his face again, exposing the tension he was trying to bury. The shadows moved over him like they were peeling away pieces he couldn't hold together. I realized then that the truth didn't frighten him being caught, did. I stepped closer, letting the light hit both of us. Jason, I said quieter now, I'm not looking for a fight. I'm looking for the truth. His eyes narrowed in something that wasn't anger so much as fear, masquerading as irritation. You're overanalyzing everything he said. You're taking little things and twisting them. I don't know why you're doing this. Because little things shouldn't contradict, I replied, keeping my voice steady. The silence that followed wasn't natural. It wasn't confusion or hurt. It was strategic, like he was calculating which answer would collapse the fewest lies. The flickering bulb cast another fractured line of light across the floor, and he looked at it again, flick, then forced stillness, evidence repeating itself in real time. I took another breath. Just tell me, I said. Were you at the venue earlier than you said? The question hung between us, weighty enough to shift the air. He didn't respond. Instead, he stared at me with a kind of pleading stubbornness, as if begging me to accept silence in place of truth. And that was the moment something in the room shifted. The quiet became a verdict. His silence told me more than any confession he could have offered. He stepped back, pacing once, dragging his hand through his hair, as though he needed a physical gesture to buy time. Elena, I love you, he said, a line he delivered like a script. Why are you doing this? Why can't you just let things be good? I stared at him. Because they aren't good, I murmured, and I think you know why. His shoulders flinched. The bulb overhead buzzed louder, flickering again, wrapping the hallway in a jittering glow. Every time the light cut across his features, another emotion surfaced: defensiveness, fear, calculation, guilt, each appearing and vanishing like the bulb was flipping through the pages of who he really was. He exhaled sharply. So what he said? Finally. You think I planned something? You think there's some big conspiracy behind a proposal? The way he said it, too exaggerated, too mocking, only deepened the crack. I think you're not telling me the truth, I replied. His mouth tightened. His fingers drummed once against the glass, then stopped abruptly when he realized it betrayed his nerves. The flickering bulb hummed. His eyes flicked upward one more time, sharp, instinctive, uncontained. He knew the truth slipping out wasn't the lie itself. It was the tells, the micro-expressions, the instant reactions he couldn't rehearse. Elena, he breathed, stepping forward. You're making this bigger than it is. People forget things. People misremember. Maybe the log was wrong. Technology glitches. You're reading too much into it. But the rehearsed explanations felt flimsy, hollow. He wasn't confused. He was cornered. The missing minute mattered to him. That was why he circled it. That was why he hid it. That was why he was unraveling now, flickering under the bulb's uneven light, like a truth trying to keep itself from being revealed. Tell me what happened in that minute, I said softly. His eyes widened a fraction. He froze. And in the silence that followed, the flickering bulb seemed to pulse in slow, deliberate accusation. He didn't answer. He couldn't. And I finally understood that some truths don't reveal themselves with words. They reveal themselves in what a person refuses to say. His refusal became the clearest admission he could have given me. I stepped back, letting the distance settle between us. His shoulders sagged, but whether from guilt or the exhaustion of holding up a collapsing lie, I couldn't tell. The hallway felt colder, sharper. The flickering bulb hummed in uneven rhythms above us, as restless as the truth clawing its way to the surface. And as the light stuttered once more, I felt the next unraveling already gathering its shape. Mark called me into one of the smaller meeting rooms just after 10 the next morning, his voice lower than usual, carrying a note of urgency that made my pulse tighten. The blinds were half drawn, slicing the room into uneven stripes of light and shadow that felt too familiar after the night before. As I stepped inside, he closed the door gently, his shoulders' stiff expression uneasy. "You didn't get this from me," he murmured, sliding a small USB drive across the table with a careful push, as though the object itself were volatile. The metal caught the light and flashed briefly before settling into the dim. I hesitated before picking it up. "What am I about to see?" I asked. Mark exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. "Footage, venue logs, more precise than the Wi-Fi timestamps." The room felt colder suddenly. "How did you get it?" "A friend who works security for event spaces owed me a favor," he said, eyes flicking toward the frosted glass panel on the door. "He pulled this because I told him your timeline seemed off. I didn't tell him it was about Jason, just that someone was lying." My stomach knotted. I slid the USB into the laptop and a window opened instantly, files neatly ordered, one of them labeled CCTV snippet number 227, evidence number 5. My throat tightened as I clicked the file. The footage loaded with a grainy shimmer, the camera angle pointed at the venue's side entrance. The timestamp in the corner glowed in precise digital numbers. 6:58 p.m., much earlier than anything Jason had ever told me. I leaned in. The door opened, and Jason stepped inside, calm, unhurried, checking his phone as if confirming instructions. No rush, no spontaneity, no near miss of timing like he claimed. He moved with intent, greeting the photographer with a handshake before gesturing toward the courtyard where the proposal later took place. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my wrists. I pressed pause, staring at the still frame of Jason smiling in the doorway, a smile that felt colder, knowing it was the beginning of a performance he had already planned. "There's more," Mark said quietly. He reached for the printed supplement that came with the drive, but as he lifted the paper edge sliced the side of my finger, quick, sharp, leaving a thin line of red. I winced, pulling my hand back, and Mark immediately offered a tissue. "Sorry," he whispered. "Didn't mean—" "It's fine," I said automatically, though my voice came out thinner than expected. The sting of the cut felt symbolic, too, on the nose, like the truth itself had reached out and drawn blood to make its point. I pressed the tissue to my finger as Mark handed me the printed timeline report. "The footage matches this," he explained. He was there for over half an hour, coordinating with staff, setting up angles, checking lighting. He paused. He asked the photographer to rehearse. The room tilted for a moment. I steadied myself on the edge of the table. My breath came in shallow waves as I stared at the unassuming timestamps, the ones Jason had been so careless with, or maybe too confident I would never question. "He rehearsed," I repeated quietly. "Yeah." Mark swallowed. "More than once." The air thickened between us. My mind raced back to the proposal, the way Jason's voice trembled too quickly, the way people seemed to know where to stand, the oddly perfect formation of the crowd, the sunset that framed the moment like a painting rather than an accident. Nothing had been spontaneous, not a single second. I pressed my injured fingertip harder into the tissue, grounding myself against the ache. The truth was no longer a suspicion. It was a sequence documented and undeniable. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't want to show you this," he admitted, "but after yesterday, after what you said, I thought you deserved the full picture." "Thank you," I said, though the words felt fragile. "I just need a minute." He nodded and stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Alone, I stared at the paused frame of Jason, his body half-turned expression relaxed and confident. It was a version of him I had never seen because it wasn't meant for me. This was the Jason who curated moments, not shared them, who crafted narratives, not lived them. I rewound the footage and watched again, needing to see it with my own eyes to feel the weight of the truth settle in a way that couldn't be undone. He walked through the courtyard, gesturing where people should stand. He pointed to where I would walk in. He practiced kneeling with the ring box, adjusting his posture, redoing the placement of his hands, until it looked natural, until it looked real, until I wouldn't question it. He didn't steal my choice, he choreographed it. My cut finger throbbed the sting, a steady reminder of the moment the truth sliced through whatever denial I had left. I closed the laptop slowly and let the silence press in. Footsteps sounded outside the room, sharper, heavier, like someone pacing. Authority had entered the story not through law, but through consequence, through exposure, through evidence that couldn't be softened with apologies or charm. I slipped the USB into my pocket, folded the tissue tighter around my finger, and opened the door. Mark was waiting, arms crossed, expression somber. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, though my chest felt too tight for full honesty. "I will be." He walked with me toward the elevators, the hallway lights casting long strips of shadow along the floor. "If you need anything," he said quietly, "I'm here." I believed him, more than I believed the man I was walking home to. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and I stepped inside. My reflection, fractured in the brushed steel panels, split into thin slivers of someone learning a truth she didn't ask for, but could no longer ignore. As the doors closed, I slipped the USB deeper into my pocket, feeling its weight like a pulse of what came next. And as the elevator descended, I sensed the story dropping into a darker layer of truth I could no longer avoid. When Jason came home that evening, the air thickened with whatever he tried to hide behind the calm of his voice. I sat at the dining table with the printed slip resting beneath my palm, its edges slightly curled, as if even the paper resisted the truth it carried. I didn't speak when he walked in. I waited for him to notice the tension, for him to step into the unraveling he had created. He set his keys down and turned toward me, forcing a smile that wavered at the edges. "You're quiet again," he said softly. "Did something happen?" Instead of answering, I slid the folded paper across the table. It moved slowly, almost deliberately, stopping an inch from his hand. His face shifted, not in shock, not immediately, but in the subtle tightening of someone whose mind began calculating the safest version of the lie he needed next. He reached for the paper, and as he leaned forward, the overhead light hit his phone in his back pocket, bouncing a pale glow upward. When he pulled his phone out to use as a distraction, its screen lit up the side of his face, the phone light on his cheek stark and cold against his tightening expression. "What is this?" he asked, though the hesitation in his voice revealed he already suspected the answer. "Evidence," I said. "Evidence you paid for something before the proposal night, something you didn't tell me about." He unfolded the slip, and in the narrow glow of his phone screen, I watched the moment the truth broke through his practiced composure. "Bank payment ref, 81ZA event, staging services." The words printed neatly across the page shattered the last of his carefully arranged narrative. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "Okay," he whispered. "I can explain." But explanations were swords he no longer knew how to wield. "You rehearsed," I said quietly. "You hired people. You staged the entire moment." His eyes lifted to mine, glossy with panic. It wasn't like that, he insisted, stepping closer. I wanted it to be perfect. I didn't think it mattered how I arranged it. It mattered that you lied," I replied. He flinched, the phone light trembling against his cheek as his grip faltered. "No," he said quickly. "I didn't lie. I just didn't give you every detail." "Every detail," I echoed. "You mean the details where you chose how I would react before I even walked into the courtyard, where you positioned people, where you rehearsed kneeling, where you paid someone to make the moment look real." He froze, the truth cutting through his defenses, leaving him exposed. For a moment he said nothing, just breathed too fast, eyes darting as if trying to find an escape route in the quiet room. Then his shoulders dropped. "I was scared," he whispered. "I didn't know if you'd say yes. I thought if everything looked perfect, if everyone reacted the right way, maybe you'd feel—" "Manipulated," I offered sharply. He winced. Persuaded, he corrected weakly. Like the moment was undeniable. The honesty in his tone didn't soften the blow, it sharpened it. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't miscommunication. This was orchestration. Deliberate, precise, controlled. "You didn't want to propose," I said quietly. "You wanted a reaction." His eyes widened, glassy with the shame he had been running from for weeks. "No," he murmured, voice cracking. "I wanted you. I wanted us. Then why didn't you trust me to choose that without a performance?" His breath shuddered. He looked down at the slip again, the numbers reflecting softly against his skin. That pale glow from the phone flickered slightly as the screen dimmed, leaving his expression half lit, half shadowed, caught between guilt and the remains of the story he wanted to tell. His face looked split, the truth finally surfacing through the fractures. "I didn't think you'd say yes," he admitted, tears forming. "Everyone expected us to move forward. They asked about it all the time. I felt cornered, like if I didn't propose soon, people would think something was wrong. And you deserved something big, something that proved—" He stopped, the sentence collapsing under its own weight. "That proved what I pressed, that you were worth choosing," he whispered. "That I was serious." My chest tightened. "You don't prove love by staging it." A tear slid down his cheek, catching the dimming light. "I know," he said. "I know. I just didn't know how to do it right." "You do it honestly?" I said. "You do it without controlling the moment." He sat heavily in the chair opposite me, rubbing his forehead, the paper trembling slightly in his hand. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he whispered. "I meant for it to be beautiful." "It was beautiful," I said. "But not because of you. Because I believed it." That line hit him harder than anything else I had said. He looked stunned, as if the truth had taken something from him he thought he still owned. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, face crumpling. "Please," he pleaded, "don't give up on us because of this." But something deeper than disappointment had taken root in me. Something still, something clear. This was no longer about a mistake. It was about the foundation he built beneath us, without telling me the ground wasn't solid. "You didn't trust me enough to let the moment be real," I said. "And now I don't trust you enough to believe what you say." He covered his face with both hands shaking. The phone slipped from his grasp and hit the floor with a dull thud. I didn't pick it up. I didn't touch the slip again. I didn't try to soothe him. Some truths aren't meant to be softened. They're meant to settle. I rose slowly from my chair. His hands dropped, eyes wide with fear. "Where are you going?" he asked. "I need air," I said. "I need clarity. Elena, please." I stepped back. The distance felt like the first honest space we had shared in months. And as his breath hitched into a quiet sob, I felt the shift toward the end beginning to take shape. Jason didn't come home until nearly midnight, long after the heaviness of the evening had settled into the walls like a second layer of silence. Rain tapped against the windows in uneven rhythms, as if echoing a truth neither of us could outrun anymore. When the door finally opened, the cold night air followed him inside, carrying the sharp scent of wet pavement. His rain-wet coat sleeve brushed against the edge of the coffee table as he walked in, leaving a dark smear that caught the ambient light like a shadow dragged across the wood. He paused when he saw me sitting on the couch, posture still, hands folded in a calm I didn't fully feel. His breath faltered. "You're still up," he said softly, voice hoarse from hours he hadn't explained. "I wasn't sure." He hesitated, as if the end of the sentence had broken apart before reaching his lips. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached over to the table beside me and picked up the object he had unknowingly left beneath a stack of mail earlier that morning, the ring box. The same box he had presented on the night of the proposal. The same box that had felt too light, too polished, too hollow. I turned it slowly in my hand so he could see the truth. I had uncovered the torn sticker on the underside, jagged and peeling, revealing the faint outline of a different label that had been removed. A label that didn't belong to an engagement ring. His eyes widened. "Where did you find that?" he whispered. "It was here," I said. "You hid it in the drawer." He stepped closer, but the sound of water dripping from his sleeve punctuated each step. "Elena, listen. Tell me what this is," I said, stopping him cold. He swallowed, gaze flicking between the box and my face, as though unsure which held more danger. "The box doesn't matter," he said, voice trembling. "It's just packaging. It's not important." "Not important," I repeated quietly. I lifted the box higher, letting the dim lamplight expose the missing label. The glue residue, the uneven tear that betrayed its rushed replacement. It belonged to a display, I said. Didn't it? A fake. Something borrowed for the night. His face collapsed in on itself, the composure he had fought to maintain, dissolving into something raw. I didn't have the real ring yet, he admitted, voice cracking. I ordered it late. It wasn't going to arrive in time. I panicked. So you used a box from a store I was going to replace it. He insisted, stepping forward again, pleading, creeping into his tone. I wasn't trying to deceive you. Everything was happening fast. I wanted the moment to be perfect, even if the details weren't. I stared at him, searching for a version of his words that felt honest. You could have told me, I said. You could have explained. His shoulders sagged, the rainwater dripping from his coat sleeve onto the floor, each drop measuring the distance between us. I thought it would ruin it, he whispered. I thought you'd see it as sloppy. It's not the box, I said, keeping my voice steady. It's the lies around it. His breath hitched. He ran a hand through his wet hair, pacing a few steps before stopping at the kitchen counter, gripping the edge as if holding himself upright. Everything is slipping, he said under his breath. I keep trying to fix one thing and another thing breaks. Because none of it was real, I said. The truth didn't break. It revealed what was already broken. He turned toward me, expression fractured by the dim light. It was real to me, he insisted. Maybe I messed up the execution. Maybe I tried too hard. But the feeling was real. I love you. I shook my head slowly. Love doesn't need choreography, Jason. His jaw clenched, desperation rising in the tightness of his stance. I didn't choreograph the love, he whispered. Just the moment. That's the problem, I said. You wanted control over my reaction. Silence settled thick between us, heavy enough to bow the air. He looked down at the ring box still resting in my palm. Please don't walk away, he murmured. Not over packaging, not over mistakes. Tell me what you need. Tell me what I have to fix. His voice trembled, not with manipulation, not with theatrics, but with genuine fear. But fear didn't erase truth. Fear didn't rewrite intention. Fear didn't undo the architecture of lies he had built around us. I stood slowly, the box still in my hand. His chest rose sharply, anticipating a decision he wasn't prepared to hear. I don't need you to fix anything, I said. I need you to stop building things you expect me to stand inside without telling me what they're made of. His expression broke open, grief flooding in faster than he could contain it. He reached for me instinctively, but I stepped back and the movement drew something out of him, a small broken sound that made the room tilt. Elena, he whispered, voice cracking so hard it barely held its shape. I'm begging you. I shook my head again, a soft but final gesture. Begging isn't clarity, I said, and I can't stay in something that only looks real from a distance. He stumbled back as though struck, collapsing into the nearest chair breath, shaking in uneven bursts. The rain continued tapping at the windows behind us, steady and indifferent. I placed the ring box on the table between us, the same table where so many small truths had surfaced over the weeks. Then I turned toward the hallway. I need time to think, I said, alone. He didn't move, didn't speak, just let the weight of everything he had created crash down on him. As I walked away, I heard the wet fabric of his coat settle heavily against the chair, a sound that felt like the echo of something ending. And in the quiet that followed the decision I had avoided finally took its place inside me. He asked me to meet him at a cafe downtown, the kind of quiet place where people pretend not to overhear each other, but always do. I didn't say yes at first. I let the request sit in my messages for an hour, heavy enough to bruise the screen. When I finally agreed, it wasn't because I hoped for a resolution. It was because some truths demand to be spoken in the open, where the air is neutral and the walls don't belong to either person. The late afternoon sky pressed gray against the city, and a cold wind brushed my face as I reached for the cold doorknob, feeling the chill run up my arm before I stepped inside. The cafe was dim lit by hanging lamps that swung gently with the draft. A few scattered customers murmured over laptops and warm mugs. Jason sat in the corner, perched on the edge of his chair, posture tight, eyes red as if he'd fought sleep or grief or both. When he saw me, relief and dread collided in his expression, and he stood too fast, knocking the table lightly before steadying himself. "Thank you for coming," he breathed. His voice was worn thin, threadbare in its effort to stay composed. I sat across from him without returning the attempt at a smile. The distance between us felt more honest than any closeness could have. He ran a hand through his hair, then gestured weakly toward his phone on the table. "There's something I need to show you," he said. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." The cafe's soft hum filled the pause. I didn't reply. He unlocked his phone with shaky fingers, opened his email app, then turned the screen toward me. An unsent draft glowed in the dim light. Evidence number 8, an unsent apology email titled, "About the Proposal." My heartbeat slowed as I read the first line. "I need to tell you the truth about what happened that night, but I'm afraid you won't look at me the same way once you know." His breath trembled. I wrote it the night after he whispered. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking that if I could just explain why I panicked, why I staged it, maybe you'd— "Why didn't you send it?" I asked. His eyes glistened, regret pressing lines into his face. Because once I wrote it, I realized how bad it sounded. Every sentence made it worse, and I thought, maybe if I behaved better afterward, if I showed you how much I loved you, maybe the truth wouldn't matter. "Truth always matters," I said softly. He closed his eyes, shoulders curling inward. "I know. I do now. But back then, I thought love could cover it." I looked back at the email. The words were uneven, frantic, as if he had typed them in a rush of fear and shame. He admitted everything: the early arrival, the coordination with staff, rehearsing the kneeling posture, directing people where to stand, instructing the photographer, renting the ring box, because the real one wasn't ready, practicing the moment until it didn't feel like a moment anymore. Every detail he had denied was written plainly in his own hand, time-stamped and saved in a draft he never had the courage to send. The truth wasn't new. It had been sitting in his pocket, waiting for him to decide who he wanted to be. I looked up at him. He watched me with an expression that broke a little each second. I stayed silent. "Elena," he whispered, voice cracking, "I know I destroyed your trust. I know I used something sacred as a performance. But it wasn't because I wanted control. It was because I didn't think I deserved you unless the moment looked worthy of you." Pain flickered in his eyes, raw and unguarded, the kind of pain that comes when someone finally understands the cost of their own choices. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." I believed he was sorry. I believed the tears gathering in his lashes weren't for show, and the tremble in his hands wasn't rehearsed. But regret didn't repair the truth. It only acknowledged it too late. "I didn't need perfection," I said. "I needed honesty." He nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "I know." His voice wavered. "I know." He looked around the cafe as if the ordinary sounds, the clinking cups, the low chatter, the hiss of steaming milk might anchor him to something steady. "Tell me what to do," he pleaded softly. "Tell me how to fix this." "You can't fix it," I said gently. His face fell, the last strand of hope dissolving. "Elena," he breathed, desperate. "I love you. Please don't leave. Please." The cafe grew quieter around us, as if the world leaned closer to listen. The truth had landed. Fully, irrevocably, and the weight of it settled into the space between us like an answer neither of us wanted, but both of us understood. Some revelations don't destroy relationships, they reveal they were already broken. I inhaled, letting the final clarity settle through me. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I can't stay." His breath caught and tears slipped down his cheeks, silent and unrestrained. He reached for my hand, but I pulled back gently, not out of anger, but out of truth. "Goodbye, Jason," I said quietly. "Take care of yourself." His face crumpled as I stood. I turned toward the door, the cold metal pressing against my palm when I reached for it. The truth behind me trembled, but my steps did not. And as the door closed behind me, I felt the end settle with a clarity that didn't shake. The city lights blurred in the distance as I stepped away from the cafe, each reflection on the wet pavement pulling the night into elongated streaks of gold and silver. My breath came steady, even as the cold air pressed against my lungs. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The weight of what I'd left behind clung to me only as memory, no longer as obligation. I walked until the noise of the street thinned into softer echoes, until the rhythm of my steps felt like my own again. When I finally stopped, it was beneath a street lamp whose faint hum reminded me of the apartment hallway, the flicker, the truth, the unraveling. My hand slipped into my coat pocket, and my fingers brushed against the small mirror shard I had found earlier that morning while cleaning the bedroom. I didn't even know at first where it came from, a broken hand mirror tucked in a drawer months ago, forgotten until now. Its edge was smooth on one side and sharp on the other, and when I pulled it out, the shard caught the streetlight, splitting my reflection into two uneven pieces. I stared at the fractured image, realizing how familiar it felt. A version of myself who believed him. A version who survived the truth. I held the shard tightly, grounding myself in the cool weight of it as the street shimmered around me. For the first time, the fracture didn't frighten me, it clarified me. A soft shout echoed behind me, distant but unmistakable. I turned. Jason stood halfway down the block, breath clouding in front of him, face flushed from running. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, shoulders hunched, expression stripped of all the polished certainty he used to wear like armor. "Elena," he called, voice cracking on the last syllable. He slowed as he approached, as though afraid that coming too close would shatter whatever fragile thread still connected us. I didn't move. He stopped a few feet away, chest rising and falling rapidly, rain still clinging to his hair from earlier. His eyes glistened under the street lamp, reflecting the light in trembling fragments. "Please don't go," he whispered. "Not like this." I studied him, not the curated version he had always shown the world, but the raw, undone one standing in front of me now. He stepped forward, hands shaking as he reached out, then froze mid-motion, unsure whether he had the right to close the distance. "I know I broke us," he said. "I know I tried to control something sacred. I know I lied. But I never lied about loving you." The words carried weight, but not enough to stitch the truth back together. "I believe you loved me," I said softly. "But love isn't enough when truth is a stranger in the relationship." He flinched, the impact of the sentence visible in the set of his jaw. "I didn't mean to manipulate you," he pleaded. "I didn't mean to turn everything into a performance. I just wanted the world to see us the way I saw us." "Then you should have asked me how I wanted to be seen," I replied. His mouth trembled. A tear slipped over his cheek, catching a thin line of light before falling. He shook his head slowly, like he was trying to dislodge the ache sinking into him. "I'm so sorry," he murmured. "I will be sorry for the rest of my life." I closed my fingers around the mirror shard, feeling its warm pressure against my palm. "I don't need apologies anymore," I said. "I need peace." His breath faltered. "Does that mean you're done?" For a moment, the world felt too quiet. The city in motion around us blurred, leaving only the two of us in a thin corridor of trembling light and shadow. "I'm done," I said finally. "But I'm not angry. I'm not leaving to punish you. I'm leaving because staying would only teach me to doubt myself. The truth didn't burn anymore. It simply cleared the air." He let out a broken sound, a soft exhale that carried years of expectation, unraveling in a single moment. His knees buckled slightly, and he sank to the curb, burying his face in his hands. I watched him, not with cruelty, not with triumph, but with quiet acceptance. His grief wasn't mine to hold anymore. He had built a moment meant to script my life, and now he had to face the reality that I refused to be written into it. I crouched down a few feet away, not touching him, but grounding the moment with my presence. "You will heal," I said softly. "Just not with me." He looked up, tears streaking uneven rivers down his face. "I don't know how to be without you." I held his gaze, steady and gentle. "Start by being honest," I said. "With yourself first, then with others. Stop performing your life." He inhaled sharply, as though the advice cut deeper than the goodbye. A breeze swept through the street, brushing loose strands of hair across my face. I rose slowly, feeling the mirror shard warm in my palm. When I straightened, Jason struggled to his feet, reaching toward me, as though instinct might somehow rewrite the ending. "Elena," he whispered, his voice trembling under the weight of a truth he could no longer outrun. "Please don't walk away." I stepped back, not in fear, but in certainty. "I already have," I said. His expression broke raw anguish unraveling across his face as he realized the difference between losing someone and finally understanding why. I turned away, letting the night settle around me, letting the city lights guide my steps towards something unchoreographed, something honest. And as I walked forward, the fractured reflection in my hands steadied into something that finally felt whole. The apartment feels unfamiliar when I step back inside, as if the silence rearranged itself while I was gone, shaping the space into something softer than I expected. I closed the door gently, letting the quiet settle around me without resistance. The hallway is dim, washed in soft shadows that no longer hold tension. I move toward the living room, where a dim lamp glows in a calm, steady circle of warm light. It's the only light I turn on. I don't need more. The air is cool, not cold, and the stillness doesn't push against me the way it used to. I take off my coat and drape it over the back of a chair, noticing how my body feels lighter now, as though I've been carrying a weight I never recognized until the moment it lifted. I walk slowly, deliberately, letting each step ground me in the present. No echoes from the past tug at my heels. No shadows stretch too long across the room. Everything is contained now, quiet, clear. I sit on the couch and let my fingers trace the pattern in the fabric, breathing deeply. Tonight feels different, not like an ending, but like air entering a space that had been closed too tightly for too long. My phone lies on the table beside me, screen dark, silent. No messages, no missed calls. I exhale, and the breath doesn't tremble. For the first time in weeks, my chest doesn't tighten when I think of Jason. There is no fear, no disappointment, no ache begging to be soothed. There is only understanding, clean and unclouded. What happened didn't simply break something between us. It revealed how fragile it always was. A relationship built on curated moments cannot withstand real ones. Clarity doesn't erase pain, but it dissolves confusion, leaving only what can be carried forward. I look toward the window. The reflection on the glass isn't warped anymore. The evening light has softened into a muted glow that doesn't distort anything inside the room. My outline is whole, undivided. A shadow falls across the floor, but it does not tremble or split or stretch into something uncertain. Shadow split, finally still. I whisper the line aloud, letting it thread into the room like a final note in a song that has learned how to end. The words feel right, steady, grounded, resolved. I stand and walk to the bookshelf where I keep a small ceramic box, lifting the lid to place the mirror shard gently inside. It doesn't belong in my pocket anymore. I don't need reminders of fractured reflections. I don't need to carry pieces of a truth that already found its shape. My hands no longer shake when I let go of things. I return to the couch, curling up with my legs tucked beneath me, watching the dim lamp glow like a quiet sentinel in the corner. Outside, the night is peaceful. No rooftop laughter, no staged gestures, no trembling moments holding their breath, just the soft hum of the city moving on, and me with it. I think about the proposal, not the performance of it, but the version I believed in. It doesn't hurt anymore. It feels distant, like a story told to someone else. A younger woman, a hopeful woman, a woman who trusted without looking too closely at the shadows. She isn't gone. She's just evolved. I pick up the mug sitting beside the lamp and wrap my hands around its warm surface. The heat sinks into my palms, grounding me in a way I didn't realize I needed. Peace doesn't arrive loudly. It slips in quietly when there is finally room for it. I lean back, letting my eyes drift half-closed as the lamp casts its gentle circle across the room. The curve of light doesn't split, doesn't distort. It simply rests. And I rest with it. A soft knock sounds at the door downstairs. Maybe a neighbor, maybe a package, but I don't move. It isn't for me. Not tonight. Tonight belongs to the stillness I earned, the clarity I claimed, the truth I no longer fear. I breathe in slow and deep, and the air feels clean. I breathe out, and nothing in me shakes. I don't know exactly what comes next. I don't know where I will go or what path will unfold from here. But uncertainty no longer feels like a threat. It feels open, wide, possible. I glance once more at the dim lamp and let its steady glow fill the corners of the room, settling into every place where doubt once lived. The night has weight, but it's gentle, and I carry it easily. I close my eyes, letting the quiet wrap around me like a soft blanket. The world outside keeps moving, but inside this room nothing is rushing. Nothing is cracking. Nothing is pretending. Everything is simply as it is, honest and still. And in the soft light of the dim lamp, I finally feel like myself again.